What's this? Guys, we're going to be starting the live any second now, although it is already live. Okay, awesome. I'm going to be talking about how you guys can rebuild your lower back after sciatica and back pain. And the one area that I'm going to be starting off with today is taking a question, a comment from the members area and just showing you guys what we're talking about here. Because so often you'll see different exercises demonstrated as a means of rebuilding back strength. And we think, I need to build my glutes. And the topic of conversation here is going to be the hip thruster. Okay, I've got it set up behind me. I'm going to show you exactly the thinking here, because it's not just an exercise. You don't walk into the gym. Now, some of you guys will have the benefit of being able to walk straight into the gym, and your PT, your trainer there, is going to set everything up for you. You can walk away at the end of the class, and that's great. But a lot of people don't have the means to be able to do that every time they're working out. And you need to be doing your rehab work regularly. You need to be doing your training regularly. And so when it comes to something like the hip thruster, everybody will be thinking, hey, look, it builds the glutes, it builds the hamstrings, whatever it may be. And that's great, but it only does it marginally more than something like the squat and something like the hip hinge. And hopefully, by me demonstrating this to you guys in real time, you'll appreciate a little bit more. I'm just getting the comments there. Just the thinking around this, and you guys can hopefully take this thinking into the stuff that you're doing for your rehab as well, if you're not part of the program. And if you are part of the program, when you're going on to latter stages, the fun stuff, right? And so what Vanessa said here is, she said, I know we're aiming to keep things as simple as possible. This is Vanessa, by the way, that last live session I mentioned her comment where she'd got back up to a level that was higher than before she injured her back in terms of load on the squat. So she's made some really good progress through the program. That's the important part. And so she said, but the fact that can you advise on other exercises I love that really help me stay consistent and stick to all aspects of the program long term. With this in mind, what are your thoughts on the barbell bridges or barbell hip thrusters at this stage? And so I'm just going to take a moment to show you guys, because it's so important. And guys, you can keep the questions coming in. I'm going to go to those in a second. The barbell hip thruster is something that people think, oh, well, it's got no load on my spine, so I can do it. What do you need to do a barbell hip thruster? You need a barbell, you need some weights, which are just out of view here, and you'll often use one of these or maybe the bench in the gym. And so just to show you guys how this is often set up, and you guys can start to immediately see, if you're recovering from a lower back injury, you need to make significant amounts of progress, because it's the load that's going through your spine in your exercises that is actually demonstrating to you that all-important question of how healed is my back. So if every time you're going in the gym to train and build strength in your lower back, in your glutes, etc., you're having to pick up the plates, you're having to pop them in place, and then you're having to get the other one. You might put obviously the safety clips on as well. I'm not going to do that here just because I'll be here all day, but putting it all together. And often with the with the hip thrusters, right? Because so many of you guys will have been told by your physio, oh, you've got weak glutes, you've got weak glutes. Well, of course you've got dysfunctional glutes, because the nerves that come out of this section of the lower back control those glutes. And so if we've got a dysfunction at the level of the lumbar spine, it's very reasonable that we might have a dysfunction in the glutes as well. And so you think, oh, hip thrusters, they're great. They really build the glutes. Let me move this spine out of the way a little bit here. And so hopefully you're seeing the palaver, the faff that is involved in actually setting up the hip thruster. And then what do I have to do? I have to go and sit down here, get myself into position under the bar. And you'll see like girls and guys doing this in the gym, and they're just sat here, right? Rounded lower back. I'm trying to turn a bit more side on here. Rounded lower back. And then they go, okay, we do our exercise. And then once you're here and you've actually started the exercise, yeah, it's great. But then you finish your exercise and then you pop it down. I've got a massive flexion through my lumbar spine. Then I straighten my legs out and I push it away. Then I've got to get up. Then I've got the whole task of actually dismantling. And maybe I've got a bunch of plates on here and I'm having to move them all around. And you guys get the idea, right? So this is a great example of an exercise that we might think on the surface is helping us deal with strengthening an area that's going to help our lower back. But because we don't think about how we get into and out of the exercise, we end up messing ourselves up. You'll go and do your glute bridges or your hip thrusters, and you'll have no problem while you're doing them. And then by the time you finish, you go home and you go, what was that? Why does my back feel so sore? And it's because of the setup and dismount. And we have to think about these things. Whenever you guys see exercises that are posted, oh, this is great for back pain, this is great for building your glutes, this is great for this, that, the other, for your sciatica, And some of them are done in quite provocative ways. Like I always remember seeing a picture of a guy on a Roman chair with the weight behind his back doing the exercise. And I'm like, please show the bit where you got into that position. Please show the bit where you got into that position. Because exercise doesn't start and finish once you pick the weight up. The exercise starts when you're putting things together and breaking it down. And those, for people that have a back injury, those factors need to be considered. And I would argue they need to be considered anyway, whether you've got a back injury or not. But really have a think about these things. So hopefully that's helpful. I've got another one I'm going to go through in a second, but just looking at some of the comments in here, Byron said, how many times should I do core phase 1 before moving on to phase 2? Generally speaking, we put this in the strategy material, guys, and by the way, if you're a member and you're watching on TikTok, definitely get over onto YouTube because it's just easier for me to monitor and manage the comments because they sometimes come in quite quick on TikTok, as well as a load of other stuff that's not relevant comes in. So with the way in which we lay out the program, you've got your strategy section for phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that tells you how you're going to go about doing the work to rebuild this lower back. And then you've got the tutorial videos for each of the exercises, and then you've got the live workouts, which is what Byron's talking about here. And so if Byron can follow along with 5 sets of 10 on those exercises, on that workout live in real time, you know, maybe you're finishing a second or two after the video is, but you're pretty much finishing on time without any aggravation and observing the correct technique on the chosen variations that you are using. There is no need to delay. Get into phase 2. Phase 2 and phase 3 are transition phases. What are we trying to do with our rehab? And how does this play out over the phases? It's very, very important when we're trying to recover from back injuries. Number 1, we need to actually become technically proficient in order to actually make the exercises work for us. Right? The big misnomer is that people think I do an exercise today and I feel a benefit today. That's not how it works. We're trying to rebuild something that has broken down, maybe through an injury, and certainly has degraded through inactivity as a result of that injury. And so in order to be safe, we must first approach from a very humble beginning and get the technique right first, which is why phase 1, 2, and 3 arguably are relatively short, although some people take a long time to learn how to do the exercises to such a degree that they can follow along, for example, Byron, in phase 1. So that's worth bearing in mind as well. Then in phase 2, we're just changing the choreography. You wouldn't believe it, but having worked with people over the years, there is a big difference for some people in going from squatting like this to holding something. Just hold a gun, right? To holding a squat and doing a squat, or holding it up here. And it does really affect people sometimes. And so practicing the choreography in phase 2 with the workouts and the way in which they're structured is a necessary step, but it's a step that you generally go through pretty swiftly. You're not going to spend very long in phase 2. Again, the same question, we talk about this in the strategy. Can you follow along through the workout with the appropriate number of repetitions at the appropriate pace? And if the answer is yes, boom, we move into phase 3. And then we go on from there. Phase 3 is about making the exercises effective. We have to find the appropriate intensity with which we are working out so we can challenge the muscles that protect this area and also the spine over time. And it always needs to be aggravation-free. We should not be aggravating ourselves. Then we get into the phase where most of the work is done, which is the phase 4. And there's an interplay between phase 3 and phase 4 because phase 3 allows you to safely test your limits and then go back into following a workout that you just go through and over and over and over again to build objective resilience in this lower back. And then 3 changes are taking place while you're doing this. Change number 1 is that technically, even from phase 1, you are making technical improvements, which means you are safer and safer every single day, every week, every month as you go forwards over time. Change number 2 is that you are actually going to be building strength after a period of time once you're working out at the right sort of intensity, which is phase 3 and phase 4. Knowing that for a lot of people, they start feeling better long before they even get to phase 3 and phase 4. They start feeling improvements because they're just more technically skilled at the exercises, which they're then doing every day when they're getting up and down out of chairs and living ordinary life, to the degree they're effectively applying those skills and principles to that daily life. And then the final benefit is literally those herniated discs that you guys have, the damaged tissues in your lower back, down here in the lumbar spine that have been injured. They are going through a healing, remodeling, and strengthening process and literally getting stronger, as is demonstrated by the fact that 6 weeks ago, you couldn't lift anything more than 3 kilos. And now you're doing 35, or now you're doing more and more and more. And it happens at a different rate for everybody. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense. Byron, get into phase 2 and onwards as well. I can see there's a couple of comments coming in on YouTube as well. Just gonna have a look back through these TikTok ones because I know there's a good few comments that have come in. Tony has said, I can't sit for 2 minutes without pain in my back. It started 4 months ago and seems to have gotten worse. Tony, you've got to do the rehab work, right? People comment about, it hurts when I sit down for 2 minutes. It hurts when I walk for 5 minutes. I can't drive the car for more than 15 minutes around the block. These are all the things that motivate you, hopefully, to do something about it, but it's very, very normal. You have an injury. When you load those tissues, such as when you're sitting down, you put anywhere from 40 to 90% more load through those lumbar spine, through that part of the lumbar spine, the lower part of the lumbar spine down here. It's a load tolerance issue. You do not have the load in those injured tissues to deal with that kind of load for an extended period of time. And so what you do is you focus on your rehab and you notice that as you progress through your rehabilitation work, you notice that the sitting starts to become easier, that you can sit for longer duration. Now, sure, there are some modifications, such as actually sitting correctly, such as not getting into the chair like this, and falling backwards. That kind of stuff obviously helps. Getting out of the chair obviously correctly helps as well. But you have a low tolerance issue. The purpose of your rehab is to help you safely rebuild that lumbar spine. And the big problem that so many people have is, what all of us have, is that we live with that lower back injury every single day. And so we're doing many things each day that are aggravating the lower back, such as sitting. So we've got to make sure we progress through our rehab work. Healing doesn't take place overnight, although it does take place overnight. Significant progress in healing, especially of the kind of tissues that are at the root cause injury of your lower back, such as damage to these discs, they heal very, very slowly compared to, say, a surface wound. We can all see very clearly a cut or a bruise on the surface of our skin and how it takes a couple of weeks to go through a healing process, yet we expect our lower back tissues that are so much slower in the rate in which they change to go through a healing process in much faster than that. And unfortunately, like in this case with Tony, the process doesn't start 4 months ago. If you haven't been doing anything constructive for the lower back, the correct sort of things, and you've been leaning on things like knee hugs and child's pose and all that kind of stuff, then the clock starts today or the moment that you start doing the right sort of things. Just move that out of the way for a moment. I'm just going to have a look through a few more comments and then I'm coming over to YouTube, guys. I have an L4 5S1 protrusion. It's really annoying me. When can I lift again? Ebra. L4-5, which is this one, and L5S1, this one and this one. These are basically the injuries that the majority of you guys watching this have. They're injuries to those segments. So everything that we're talking about here is going to be relevant to you, but hopefully take stock of what I've just mentioned, for example, to Tony. Like, it's load. When can I lift? How much? How much is the answer? I don't know how much you want to lift, Ebra. I have no idea. Do you want to lift a little container, a phone? Do you want to lift a phone, right? You will probably be lifting the phone. And this is the point. People say, when can I lift again? It's like, that's not a specific question. The quality of the answer, the quality of the outcome is going to be dictated by the question and how good the question actually is, how detailed the question is. And what you need to do, the best place to do this is within the context of your exercises. This is why we use the squat, because that's the safest place for you to start to expose your spine to load. Have you, I'm sure many of you guys watch this, have you had your phone and gone and sat on the toilet seat with it in your hand at some point? Or have you had your phone and gone and sat in the car with it in your hand? Have you had a large jumper on or a coat on? Those are all load. And did you move from A to B with them? If you did, then you've been lifting already. The big problem is that you don't realize or don't you don't consciously go, oh, I am already lifting. I'm just not lifting a thing that looks like a dumbbell or a barbell. For some reason, there's this belief that that's somehow different. Understand you're lifting every single day with those herniations, bulges, or injuries to the lumbar spine. And so you should be doing something careful and controlled, such as rehab. Just looking through some of the comments here on YouTube. Guys, keep them coming on TikTok. I'll come back to TikTok in a second. Michael has had a L5S1 herniation a couple of weeks ago. And when he stands for more than 10 minutes, he feels extremely fatigued in the lower back region which makes him lie down. Again, Michael, hopefully the chat just now has been quite helpful for you in realizing that it's just a case of load. Lying down like that, it takes load off the spine. Being up like that puts load back on the spine. We must be working through the rehabilitation work to build strength and stability, and we will notice that as we go through healing, as we then go through strengthening, and it's very difficult to draw the line when healing stops and strengthening takes place, that you will find that you can spend more time like that. Insert strain on the spine here. Is it sitting down? Is it standing up? Is it going for a walk? Whatever it may be, is it putting strain on the spine? Yes, because you've got your body weight on your spine. And so you're going to have a limit to that. Everybody does. Everybody will have some kind of limit. Is it minutes? Unfortunately, for a lot of you guys with back injuries, it might well be. Is it hours? Is it days standing up? Well, it's very unlikely. The job of our rehabilitation work is get us to a point where we have built such resilience into our body that the likelihood of being exposed to the kind of stress or strain that would be beyond that which we are conditioned for is very, very slim. Once we're there, that's when we're in those pain-free levels, where we're feeling good every day, and we're not struggling with silly vulnerabilities, unfortunately, or fortunately. Martin said, question about a hip hinge. I did 5 sets with 10 kilograms yesterday, feeling better today than yesterday, but I only feel soreness in my hamstrings and glutes today. It's very common. So Martin has also said, should I be feeling stiffness or soreness in the lower back too, or does it mean I'm doing it wrong? No. Yeah, that's the end of Martin's question. So when we're doing the hip hinge, I'm just going to move this out of the way. When we're doing the hip hinge, most of you guys should be feeling, as you get to the bottom of the hip hinging motion, its hamstrings kick in. And some of you guys will feel the glutes a little bit as well. Personally, I feel a lot more hamstrings than glutes when I do it. And that's not really an issue, right? The weakest part is going to be the part you often notice the most. Okay? The back maintaining nice and stable and going through, often people will feel a back pump. But it is the hamstrings that are going through the slow lengthening, and that really, really challenges them. So it's very, very common. I know I've experienced it many times as I've been getting back into the loading work as a result of my knee. Like the hamstrings, I did squats today up to 100 kilos for 10 reps. I've been building back in the hip hinges after the meniscus damage a couple months back as well. And I've been noticing some good DOMs. Like it's perfectly reasonable to notice that soreness the next day. It's a great sign that you're doing that aggravation-free. And Martin, if you're working through the program, hopefully you're looking at doing, an interplay between the phase 3 work and the phase 4 work to make sure that we're actually working out at the right kind of level. But it sounds like we are. Steady progress is always better than fast progress. It really is. Thank you for the question, Martin. Any others follow up with that, please do. What else have we got here? Jackie has said, I started phase 1 just over a week ago. Should I do it every day? Make sure, guys, you are always, whenever you join the program, you are starting off with the strategy videos. And then you're going into the the tutorial videos for the individual exercise. And then you're doing the live workout. And that explains, like there's a dedicated unit. How do you approach the live workout? How are we doing the live workout itself? When do we move on to phase 2? So it's all broken down so you guys can follow through this. Generally speaking, Jackie, we should be doing the phase 1 workout every day, but you need to be looking for that question. Right, going back to the strategy material and watching that video on when do I move on to phase 2, the answer here is if you're able to follow along with the phase 1 workout live at time with your chosen variations of the exercises, dead bug, marching bridge, squat, hip hinge, step up, single leg hip hinge, you're able to follow along with that without any aggravation, then you're ready to start looking at phase 2. So please do not delay. There is no reason to just continually do phase 1 because it's not, yes, you might be getting some additional technical improvement, but you need to get into phase 3 and phase 4 because this is the big problem. We are in a race, and I don't want to say this to rush you guys, but the simple fact of the matter is if our rehab work is significantly less strenuous than the next 10 things we're going to do after we've finished our rehab work, because you've got to empty the dishwasher, we've got to go and do the laundry, we've got to collect the kids, we've got to walk the dog, like all of that other stuff is way more problematic. We need to get to the point where our rehab work is actually harder than daily life. And so if we're still doing 0 load exercises, we need to be getting towards the point where we're actually safely challenging ourselves in what we would call phase 3 or phase 4, because at the moment we're unsafely challenging ourselves every single day. Noticing that any of you guys that have sat down during the last 10, 15 minutes, many of you guys will be sat down watching right now, you're already putting 40 to 90% more load through your lumbar spine than when, for example, you're standing there doing a squat, for example, or just standing there. Yes, there are some changes in terms of the hip hinge, in terms of loading and those kind of things, but you're still putting yourself through variably increasing amounts of load that you're not really measuring and we're not really paying attention to in our daily life. So please move towards that phase 2 and phase 3. Obviously always observing the principles that we talk about, such as aggravation-free and correct choreography. That goes without saying, although I'll say it again anyway, I'm sure. I'm looking at some more of the comments coming in. Mama Bear says, before progressing to weights on the squat, is it better to work on achieving? No. That's a very good question, Mama Bear. So I think I might have touched on this yesterday. I'm just going to zoom that out a little bit because that camera is so tight on my head. There we go. Lovely. Okay, so I touched on this yesterday, I think, and it's about the concept of range and load. If we're using zero load on the squat, I have basically an infinite room for improvement on the loading aspect. And the loading aspect that is what is increasing the strength of the spine and the strength of my muscles, fundamentally. Right, there is maybe a little bit to be said for, well, there is a little bit to be said for increasing the range of motion, challenging the muscles, but we'll get to that maybe later. So when I am doing my squat, if I'm using no weight, or if I'm using 1 kilogram or 2 kilograms or 3 kilograms, I've basically got practically an infinite room for improvement in my squatting load to build the strength of my spine. But if I'm squatting to here, I've maybe got a 50% room for improvement in the range of motion before I max out. And so it's much better that you focus on building the strength, because the range will come in time anyway. And yes, you might do a little bit of stuff along the way to improve the range, but for most of you guys, you need to build load tolerance more, because you're exposing your spine to load more through every single day. And it comes back to that metric that I just mentioned a moment ago, of that we need to build your spine to a point where your exercises are more strenuous than daily life. And for every single one of you coming into the program, starting work on your rehab, you've been struggling, you've just had a herniation, you've just had a microdiscectomy like Michael's case, you've had all sorts of issues going on for a long period of time, your daily life is more strenuous than what you are capable of handling, which is why daily life hurts you, which is why you have flare-ups every day, which is why you're watching me talk right now. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Any other questions, guys, on that topic, you can post below. Thank you for the question, though. It's a very common one indeed. And don't try and increase both things at the same time. You measure 2 parameters, you don't know which one's doing things, right? It might be that you force going too low on the squat and your bum tucked under and you rounded your lower back, and that was the issue. But if you're trying to do that at the same time as increasing the load, you don't know what was actually the issue. We need to use our rehabilitation exercise as the lab. That's where we expose ourselves to strain. That's where we test the limits safely with one variable at a time, so that we can understand how we responded to that variable and then make changes. And in spite of that, we're still going to do many other things that kind of skew the feedback that we can get. As soon as we finish the workouts, oh, the doorbell rang, I had to go and run and get it. Oh, someone called me, I've got to go out. Oh, back to work, right? All those sorts of things. Oh, I've been called into a meeting for 4 hours. You know, that bothered my back. Was it that, or was it the exercise? It was the meeting. Michael has said, how do you do your squats? Is it with a barbell on your neck, or are there safer options? Michael, I would definitely recommend checking out the program. Like, we always start the squats. They need to be started safely. You do body weight, then you hold onto a weight here, then you do a low hold with a dumbbell and progress on. You do not start out with barbell squats with the weight behind your back. That is not a smart move. An honest question, and a good question. And I think that's partially why the fear is there about using weights, because people do sincerely think or believe that the only way to do a squat is to do it like so, with the barbell on your back. And of course, that's, you know, it takes time to get up to that kind of thing, right? We're not going to be doing that straight away. We're not going to be doing that for a little while in most cases. However, the squat with the bar on your back is probably something that you're going to want to leverage for most of you at some point sooner or later, because quite frankly, it's the easiest way for you to scale the load that you're doing. A lot of you guys won't have access to significant levels of dumbbells, so you can't build to the kind of loads that you want to expose yourself to build that load tolerance. So something to think about there. Hopefully that's helpful. Coming back over to TikTok, some of the questions on here. What else have we got? Adding load. This is a good one, I think. Adding load is what started making my knees and ankles go sore and out of whack. I feel setback now. And this is very common. Those of you guys that have lower back issues, especially if they've been going on for a long period of time, most of you guys also have weaknesses in areas that mean you're going to have problems with your knees and ankles and hips. Because if you have weak legs and you can't do a squat with correct form, you're not controlling the knees very well. People say, I've got bad knees. No, you haven't got bad knees, you've got weak legs. Weak legs led to exploitation of a knee that then resulted in injury, which resulted in less activity, which resulted into weaker legs, which creates a vicious downward cycle. And so the reason that you're bad is maybe your knee was bad a little while ago, and so you stopped bending your knee, so you started bending down and doing this all the time, abusing the lower back. because you didn't want to bend the knee. And we just dealt with, unfortunately, a knee injury badly, which meant we had a back injury. The amount of time that people come in that scenario, it's very, very frequent. Very, very frequent. And so when we're rehabilitating, we're not just rehabilitating the lower back. We have to deal with each part of the puzzle as we go along. And if you get to a point where you're starting to find that the knees are getting a little bit bothered, we need to look, are we actually doing the squat correctly? We might be holding the back steady, but the knees are going all over the shop. That means we're not squatting with correct technique. So we go back, correct, aggravation-free, and with correct technique. And so we go back and get the technique right. And maybe, for some scenarios, we need to focus, and this is one of the reasons why we split the workouts out from phase 2 onwards, is that we need to focus a little bit more on the hip hinges, because our squats need to just dial back a little bit, and we can't really leverage those to push the load as much as the hip hinges, which don't involve the knees in the same way. And so we work on our squats. We can only move at the pace of the slowest soldier, right? And if our knees are the slowest soldier, then we're going to have to move a little bit more steadily on the single leg exercises that involve the knee bend, and make sure, again, we're working aggravation free. It requires a little bit of work. This is why you should also be videoing yourselves whenever you're doing your rehab work. You really, really should. You know, ask yourself the question, when was the last time I recorded my workouts? We've got some of the guys doing absolutely fantastic jobs, recording themselves on the workouts, uploading things, having a look, seeing what's going on. And to that end, Nirav has posted on here, the barbell back squat also gives me downward load on the spine, which allows the spine to adapt to the load. Nirav doing a great job of uploading the squats, but a little error that I think was made, not the squats, the hip hinges in the group today. But one of the little errors that's very, very common is some of you guys will go and push through when we get to the top of the range with the hip hinge, right? We're using a barbell. And we go down, and we come up and we boom. You'll see guys in the gym do a deadlift and boom, pushing like that. Do not do that. Do not do that. There's no value from a strengthening point of view in absolutely hammering your L5-S1 facet joints together at the top of the repetition. And to the comment, the barbell back squat, Nirav, is something to progress onto. Yes, it's going to give load in the spine. The thing you've got to be mindful of is sometimes for some people they're going to feel like it helps them fold over, which is something that you need to stop from happening. And so it's a natural progression that you will most likely get onto sooner or later, Nirav, for example, because you've got to move on to that, right? You're not going to be able to hold the weight down here. You're doing dumbbell squats maybe for the time being, but you're going to have to progress onto the barbell. And why not, right? Why not? Why not? Brad has said, now that I'm nearly cured, thanks to you and me. Yes, it's a team effort. That's the most important thing, guys. No one fixes you. No one fixes you. No one fixes your back pain. It's a team effort. You might work with someone or a group or a program or whatever, or some expertise to help you fix the back problem. And that's one of the real blessings that we've had since we've had the program, as compared to before, pre-COVID, when we just had the clinic. Now we've obviously got both, but before, when we just had the clinic, often there were people giving you their back problem. You fix me. And they'd go out and do all sorts of things. And actually, you know, we've been very blessed with having a lot of members that are really wanting to engage in the process and be part of fixing their back, which is the secret. That's the secret, right? You've got to be part of the process. And so, can I just do core 5 progressions mixed in with my own exercises forever now? That is the idea. The idea is that as you come through the program, as you're making progress on your rehabilitation, rehabilitation turns into strength training. Strength training, you build habits around that. Brad, Nirav will be there before you know it, I'm sure as well. As you get to that stage in the program, we talk about the addition of the additional workouts that are working the upper body. So you formulate your own routine, something to aim for, an idea, right? Maybe for Brad, something to think about here. You might want to do some other bits and pieces as well out there, so you've got your hobbies that you factor into that routine. But it might be that you get to the point where you're doing a heavy squat day, maybe on a Tuesday. You're doing a heavy hip hinge day, maybe on a Friday, something like that. And then you might have a couple of upper body days. You might have a lower load recovery, active recovery day. You might do a couple of upper body workouts in there. You might have a cardio day where you're working a little bit more explicitly on cardio, maybe with some low load abs or something like that. Mixing and matching some of the stuff from some of the workouts that we've put in that additional workout library, Brad and others, and formulate your kind of routine. But the idea is that hopefully many of you guys that see our stuff, that use the program and that do this, even those of you that don't, that just use the free stuff that's online, you start to become aware of actually the value, the real true value of doing rehabilitation work, doing strength training, resistance training for the long term. It's something that you factor into your daily life for going forwards, period, full stop. And you commit to that because you've seen in a self-evident way the power that it has. And we're just talking about the back, let alone all the other many, many benefits that come from regularly doing resistance training. Just coming over to TikTok here. What else have we got? Some new questions coming in here. Have been hip hinging pretty well, but what can you suggest to improve it and move forwards? It's just increasing the load. It's just increasing the load, does it? That's all you got to do. It's not no more than that. Cynthia said, can I do rehab work after K-laser treatment? Personally, I would always try and do my workout before K-laser. I like doing like relief stuff or treatments after a workout. And when people come into the clinic, we've got the laser in the other room, we've got decompression over my shoulder. It's always the case if you don't do a hard workout after you've had those treatments. You could do a hard workout before, but not after. What else have we got here? Just looking through some of the comments. Alina has said, 4 years of sciatica, lower spinal disc bulge, horrible posture, and don't want surgery. Get stuck into some of the program material. Guys, if you're not a member, do check out, if you're over on TikTok, check out the link up here. Watch the video up there. There's a little bit more information about the program. It will really help you. Seriously, check it out. Watch the video. It explains a lot more. And guys, those of you on YouTube, I'll paste it in the chat. And thank you very much, Brad. That's very kind of you. Thank you for the super chat. That's really appreciated. Brad said, people, stick with this. It works. It does. It works. You've got to do the work. The consistency. The consistency is what makes the world of difference. It really does. Let me just turn that off, the volume off there. Okay, what else have we got here? Then I'm going to come back over to YouTube, guys. Stoic, where's the clinic? It's in Cheltenham, or just outside of Cheltenham, UK. What else have we got here? Awesome. I'm going to come back over to YouTube. What have we got up here? So we've got esoteric JC. I've just recovered from a mild herniated disc that caused major sciatic pain. Now I started doing back extension machine for a few weeks. What's the next step? I don't really rate the back extension machine personally, but that would generally be a hip hinge type motion. You need to be building capacity in your spine. So we, for example, use the squat, the hip hinge. The hip hinge would be replacing your back extension machine. To steadily build load. Why am I saying replace the back extension machine? Because I know there's a lot of people out there that have used the back extension machines to make great results. But it's so much harder when you're locked in to the machine to go and pick up a kettlebell when you're in there, right? You're in the machine. I really need to get one of these machines. To be honest, just with that, because I talk about it so much. Let's pretend I'm in the back extension machine, right? Now, to get the weight that I want to use to work out with, like, it's a lot of faff, it's a lot of hassle, right? Whereas, and all I'm going to do with that exercise is do a hip hinge. So I may as well just do a hip hinge because I can pace it down carefully, or depending on the weight I'm using, right, I might be able to put it on somewhere that's more secure than that. And then I can do my hip hinge and then come back up. And steadily, you should be building the load that you are using to build load tolerance in your lumbar spine. Why are we using load? We're using it for two reasons, and they happen over or the changes take place over different time frames. Number one, when we're doing our squats and our hip hinges with steadily progressive loads, once we get to the right level, right, and that means it has to actually be challenging. If you do 10 reps, like if I do 10 reps of a hip hinge with a 6 kilo weight, right, and I'm finishing, I'm like, boom, oh, hip hinge, sorry, not squat. 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then I put it down. Like, that's not building anything. I'm getting technique, right, which is necessary. That's phase 2. But once I know what I'm doing, I need to actually do something that challenges me safely without aggravating the symptoms. Very important, right? Very important, that last part. I have to do it safely in a way that does not aggravate the symptoms. That allows over a period of weeks, once I get to that point and train at that point, over a period of weeks, I'm going to get change in the muscles. My muscles are going to get stronger. I will notice that because the weights get easier. And retrospectively, I noticed that very clearly because I know I could only do. Like, for example, I've been working on chin-ups, and I did some chin-ups this morning. I used a 20 kilo weighted vest. A couple of weeks ago, maybe more like a couple of months ago now, actually, I was only doing 2 reps of the chin-ups with the 20 kilos. And now up to 7, and I could probably push out 8 or 9 if I really didn't have another few sets to do, right? You know, and you can see that actually it's getting a lot easier, but you only see that retrospectively. So the first change when we're working out at the right intensity with the load, this is for you guys recovering from your back injury, rehabilitating your back injury, is that you're building the muscles, around here. That happens in a matter of weeks when we're doing things at the right intensity. Because if you're not, then it's not going to happen, right? You just keep doing 10 reps of squats on 5 kilos for the next 6 years, you're not going to make any strengthening improvements. And that's a mistake that some people make. They do the right exercises, but don't actually do it properly over time. And then as we're doing that over a longer period of time, months we're talking about here, you're literally strengthening up the actual spinal segments themselves. The ligamentous tissues of the disc start to remodel. The cartilage starts to remodel. The bone starts to remodel in response to the stress and strain that you are putting your spine through. Nirav said, when I do it, RDL hip hinge, I sometimes shift to the left and this causes more pain. Don't do that. Please focus, Nirav, on keeping it square. Remember, we've got aggravation-free and correct choreography. We should always be keeping it square. That might be some kind of quirk that you're doing as you're doing it. Make sure you're keeping yourself square. Make sure you're keeping yourself square. Lynn has said, please show the exercises. I will do as we're going through them. And also, obviously, there's more detailed videos on the website on the exercises specifically. Esoteric has said, or Esoteric JC has said, hip hinge, I think it's a great spot to go to next and good precursor to getting back into squats. I'd say we typically suggest that the hip hinges and the squats are done simultaneously. I wouldn't switch from one to the other, although obviously there is crossover there. I would really be doing both. MJ Hoper said, I love doing the phase 1 and do feel progress, but when I wake with pain and it just brings me down. I'm so tired of the ups and downs. Will I hurt the nerve if I push through it in my morning? One of the really important things to know, guys, is you've got to compare. And that's why I do try and drum into you guys about this loading, right? Because when M Hope sits on the side of her bed in the morning or his bed in the morning and is feeling that pain, you're sat there putting 40 to 90% more load through the lumbar spine. First thing, boom, straight away. You have to, right? You can't just float out of bed. And so we take a step back and go, well, what am I doing on my exercises? At the moment, we're in a very early stage, so it happens. It happens. And that's all I can say, unfortunately. There's no shortcuts in this. It happens at the rate that you drive it. But you need to drive it. You need to drive it to phase 2, to phase 3, to build the load, to start to expose yourself safely to the spine. And then you notice that those things go away. And I think there's a lot of people that are stuck in that early stage of recovery, looking for improvement, but they're not getting improvement because they're constantly worried or just worried about their experiencing pain, so they just never push the exercises. James, yes, it's just on YouTube these days, just on YouTube. I think we mentioned it about two or three weeks ago now on the live. Esoteric, thanks for the advice, Back in Shape program guy. Thank you, it's a pleasure. What have we got on TikTok coming through? Guys, those of you on with us live on YouTube, we're still going for another 20 minutes or so, 23 minutes. So if you've got any more questions, please do post them in the chat. And for those of you that don't know, if you're some members that are joining us, we are going live a good couple of times a week nowadays. So it just gives you guys opportunity to dip in and out as your schedule permits more frequently. And after we finish the lives, later that day, usually, we'll post a little blurb or recap in the members area of what we've discussed. And obviously all the chapters get put in a little bit later on as well. So you can check that on the video. But you can access it instantly. So if you haven't joined the live, if you think you've maybe missed it or you're coming in late, you can still join late. Halfway through the live, you can scrub back or watch me on 2x speed if you want to listen to me talk even faster to catch back up with where we're at. Just going over to TikTok, guys. What have we got in here? Chef has said, love your videos. There's a work program if you have congenital, I think you mean, congenital stenosis. My facets of joints have narrowed. I think we're talking about two things here. Some people have, so the short answer, Chef, is yes. Chef Warren, yes. Yes, it does. There's a couple of considerations here. I think what he's meaning is for some people, these little bits of bone here are a little bit shorter, which means that if we imagine we've got a hole or a tube that the spinal canal runs through, it's just a shorter tube. So instead of the bone, the back of the vertebral body being here, and the nerve running through the middle, right? It's here. So it's just a smaller hole. The reality is if we've got any of these congenital changes and we've been struggling with back pain, usually they're mentioned after a long period of time. They're often not the first thing that are mentioned when you guys go and see someone about your lower back. And this is sometimes misleading because it makes you think, oh, it's because you've got congenital shortening or narrowing or congenital stenosis. Or it's because you've got lumbarization of the spine or sacralization or Bertolotti's syndrome. You've got these variations, anatomical variations. The simple truth is that you've had those your entire life, but you have not had back pain your entire life. Now, many people will say, I've had back pain for a long period of time. But it's not been the entire life every single day for the vast, 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 vast majority, even though it might feel like that. If we actually look back, it's not been every day. And so one of the important things to bear in mind is that, yes, you have a variation, which means that there is less space where these little nerves come out. And most of that lesser space is going to have been there the whole time living. Now, if we've got a bit of facet joint hypertrophy, which is probably what's going on there, which narrows this space a little bit further, sure, we've got a smaller hole. But you will see many, many people, or I've seen many, many people, where you've got their x-rays, you've got their MRI scans, and you know they've got a lot of disc degeneration. Like this disc has dropped in height significantly, and these are small spaces. But if you manage and rebuild the strength and stability of that spine around that area and stop flaring it up, the size of the hole doesn't really matter too much. Yes, it might be smaller. But and what will happen in the process of the rehabilitation for people like Chef, as they're just starting, Chef Warren, is that where you make mistakes and errors in the rehabilitation work that you are doing, and you cause a little bit of a flare, you will feel it disproportionately to the severity of the objective injury. However, as you progress on and you build strength and stability, you'll be doing well. You will be doing well. Let me just close that one there. And you'll find it's not an issue that needs to be there long term. It's just in that process where you are building, you really will need to be a little bit more careful of having flare-ups and understand that if you do give yourself a little flare-up because you push yourself a little bit more, then you're going to be likely to suffer disproportionate severity of the symptoms, if that makes sense, relative to the injury. However, I will say this for sure, most of your flare-ups are going to come from ordinary stuff that you're doing every single day, probably in the kitchen in this particular example. You're putting yourself, or will most likely be putting yourself under way more strain, assuming the name implies the occupation, way more strain doing all of that stuff in the kitchen than you will doing the exercises. So most of the flare-ups will come over there. James, glad you got it sorted out. Let us know in the comments what you did, because I'm sure there might be some other people watching that haven't managed to access the chat. What was the mistake that we had? Because I know on YouTube, you guys can collapse the live chat and bring it back up again. So that would be very beneficial for everybody else watching, James, if you could let us know in the comments what you got working. Chef, no bending or twisting. That is exactly what you will be doing. And yes, it is brutal if you're in the kitchen, yes. You've got to make sure that you are careful, but you'll be learning habits. Now, one of the important things about the habits that you guys are learning when you're going through this rehab work, right, is that we see it frequently, and I've mentioned it before, but it'll happen to you guys, right? And this is why practicing the squats from day one is so important. Because what will happen is someone will be on the video, and then maybe they're further on, right? Maybe, I hope it doesn't happen when they're further on using a barbell, right? Because that's definitely a phase 4 kind of level of rehab, right? But they'll boom, off it comes, really good, hip hinge 1, 2, they do 10 reps, and then they put it back, nice and safely, awesome, and then they come over to the camera and turn it off, right? The reason that we're doing the squat is so that you start to not have to think what you're doing when you sit down. You just do it with good technique. You don't think when you get out of the car. You don't think when you do these things. It's baked in a good habit. That's why we're learning these things. Because the reality is you guys are getting up and down. When Chef's in the kitchen and he's doing all that stuff, he needs to have it baked in to his cerebellum, the area that you don't think about. Runs the automatic squat program so that he moves correctly without having to catch himself up, or catch himself out, sorry. Esoteric has said, what do you think about inversion tables? Are they helpful for healing the back and maintenance? I like them. Mum and Dad have one. My auntie has one. We've obviously got the big table in the back. You know, but you definitely don't want to buy that. That's quite expensive, I will say. Inversion tables are great, but you've got to use them correctly, right? You've got to understand what they are, right? Inversion table would be a surrogate or a replacement for the bed decompression, for example. It's a mechanism for you to unload the lumbar spine at whim and create a pumping effect. So you go on the inversion table, you go flat, and you go down a little bit. You never go upside down on the inversion table, unless you're just messing around, right? Which I would suggest is not wise when you've got a back injury. You go down to like that kind of angle, so your head down here, then you come back up, then you go back down again, and then you come back up, and you go back down again, and you create this pumping, right? We've got a tutorial, and I think we're probably going to redo the tutorial at some point in the not too distant future, so keep an eye out for that. But I think they're great, but it's a relief-based practice. You might do it after you've done a hard workout. You might do it after you've gone for a long walk with the dog. You might do it after you've had a long day in the office. Great relief-based practice that you can do at home, but you have to use it properly. Use all the safety equipment. Get one that has a long stalk to unlock your ankles. This is the kind of stuff we talk about in the tutorial videos on using the inversion tables, but I think they're great. And I think, could you use them long term? Yes, because we brush our teeth a couple times a day, right? But we're not eating all day. Your spine is being squashed down all day. Does it make sense? Yes, you have that period of sleeping where you're offload, but if you've got a history of a back issue and you know you are abusing your lower back more than you otherwise should be through your occupation, etc., then jumping on there for 10 or 15 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes at the end of a long day's work, not a bad idea at all. Just don't buy one and then stick it in the garage because if you're not going to use it, if it's packed away, the faff of getting it out is going to be a problem. So make sure you've got the space to have these things around. Otherwise, it's just a waste of money because it's only useful if you actually use it. And I would suggest you should use it, but something to think about. Nina has said, I had CES, so quarter equina syndrome, so had to have a microdiscectomy at L5S1. Now I'm a bit scared to do anything. I'm not confident with what to start with. I would definitely say, Nina, have a look at the program. Have a look at the program. I'll put a link in the chat over here. Watch the video over there. It explains a little bit more. But understand, it sounds as though you've probably not had very good guidance after having the microdiscectomy. But you will rebuild confidence if you have evidence to suggest you should be confident. So if you go and you start playing around with some of the core exercises, engaging your core, the exercises like the squats, etc., and you're recording yourself, and you're taking copious, detailed notes on what you're doing and how you're doing it and where you went wrong last time, and looking at the video and watching the tutorials, etc., right? You've got plenty of time, I imagine, now to do that because we've probably just come out of this procedure, right? Relatively recently. And so you're practicing on your squats, and then you're getting better, and then you're steadily adding load. You're going to start to build confidence back. You have to build confidence. And you need tools to do that, to safely go about that process. That's why we have, for example, when you start the program, people think, oh, we'll just go and do exercises. As someone said earlier on about the squat, I don't think this is exactly what they were saying, but they said, oh, do I have to do squats with a barbell? No, you don't. You do it in a sensible manner. But that's why when we have members come through the program, it's done in a very strategic way. You follow along with a bunch of strategy videos so you feel ready and prepared to go about the tutorial videos, which you then watch and then you practice them. So you've watched maybe an hour and a half of material, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. Hopefully you haven't skipped through anything. And then you go and have a go. And you're informed. You've read the instruction manual. You haven't tried to wing it. It's your back. You've only got one. We really get drilled into what we're doing and we try and do it with precision. And then we can build success. And then you just build little wins and they stack up. And then you build, Nina, a little database of evidence to suggest that your back is starting to get better. But while you're doing that, please know that everything else you're doing on a daily basis is going to be uncontrolled, unmonitored, and really those are going to be where your flare-ups and relapses come from, right? Touch wood, they don't happen, but everybody has flare-ups along the way as they're recovering from back injuries because we can't control everything in daily life, even from sitting on the edge of the bed, right? We're worried about putting load through our spine, but we sit on the edge of the bed and put more strain through the lumbar spine. I'm not saying that to make you worried. I'm saying that to put things into perspective. You sat on the edge of the bed and it was sore, but you got up and you got over it, right? And you did it anyway. So let's start doing something that has a cumulative benefit, i.e. learning how to control ourselves so that action when you get off the edge of the bed is done with greater poise, control, and in a more beneficial manner. Christian said, I just had my first IDD session. I think it's promising so far and we'll be phasing in rehab after a few more sessions as instructed by the physio. Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to see where you're getting that done, Christian, just out of my personal interest, knowing, being part of the IDD network and that kind of stuff. But I always think, you should be doing your rehab work arguably before you even start the IDD, to be completely honest, because that's what makes you safer after IDD, right? If you haven't started learning how to squat, you're going to get back in the car after your IDD session. Are you going to do that right? Are you going to do that wrong? Could you do it better? Could you do it in a way that's more favorable for the lower back? Probably. Something to think about. But great that you're getting the help. IDD, it's great. But it's got to be done with rehab. It is a relief-based strategy. It's supporting the healing process, but it's not supporting the strengthening process, although it can do if you're leveraging your rehab. Like if you use that over the long term, alongside the rehab work, let's say you're in phase 4 and you're increasing the load that you're using, and you want to, one of the things that we suggest for patients, for example, is, hey, look, you don't need to have treatment now at this stage regularly in any meaningful way, but if you feel like you want a bit of extra support, you're going to have a hard session, you're going to move up to the next weight. Let's say in your phase 4, you've made some good progress. It's been about a month or so, maybe 6 weeks. Just come in the day after you've had that hard session in the gym. It just helps, It's just something that helps. Some people find it helps more and they want to invest in that. It's all about means and time and that kind of stuff at that point. But it's a nice strategic use of it. I would suggest, personally, and I know this differs from the official instructions that you'll get from the guys at the clinic, so bear that in mind. But I personally think spreading the treatments out over a longer period of time actually is when you've got the appropriate rehab, is a better strategy, personally. Obviously, you could do both. It's just more expensive, that's all. Oh, James, went on the YouTube app on my phone and went straight through. Oh, awesome. That makes it sound so simple. Thanks, James. Sherry said, will this be available to watch on replay? I've literally just hopped on. I have sciatica, degenerative disc, and hypermobility. Docs have given me no info on what I can do at the gym to strengthen. Sherry, yeah, all of these, like can you talk, Mike? All of the live streams are like instantly processed. So as Sherry has said, you might be jumping on, you might be watching like from 10 minutes ago or something like that. So bear that in mind. But they're instantly available on replay as soon as we finish the live, which will be in about 10 minutes time. And then we put the chapters and stuff on later on in the day. That'll come on a little bit later. But on the topic of hypermobility, well, number one, Sherry, I'd definitely check out the program in the meantime and then come back onto the live because that's the right thing to help you. But hypermobility is something that really, like a lot of the guys that come in through the program or post and things like that have hypermobility, too much mobility. Maybe they have EDS as a specific condition, but maybe they've just been diagnosed with it in a more informal manner. You're flexible, right? It's a liability because often you guys feel like you need to stretch more and you're like, objectively, what is your range of motion like? Oh, my range of motion on the hamstring stretch is like I'm folding all the way over. It's like, okay, well, you don't need to do more stretching. Although it feels tense, that doesn't mean it needs to be stretched more. It's tense because it's weak and it's trying to hang in there. And it's got some signals coming from the lower lumbar spine, for example, the hamstring specifically. What I will say is if you can get your head around that understanding being very different to what you have been taught in the past or what you feel, understand there's a back injury, understand there's feelings of tension, but there is adequate mobility, or more than significant mobility, and that you need to build strength. Long term, I do think that having the presence of the hypermobility, providing it's not to a significant degree where joints are dislocating all the time, which is rare, I think it's probably more of an asset than a liability, to be completely honest. Because you'll find that you can maintain that good level of mobility for the long term. One of the really important things for you guys with lower back injuries is that we rebuild strength in the spine to a significant level. We talk about aiming for 70, I won't even go through the aiming, but we talk about aiming for good levels of strength, right? The first two targets are going to be 20% of your body weight and 45% of your body weight because that's what's going through your spine when you're sitting down on the squat and hip hinge without aggravation. And you guys can all get there. But we build good levels of strength and load tolerance through the spine, which by definition, if we're doing a squat and hip hinge, means we have strong hip musculature. And then the next thing to do, because we know the spinal structure is stronger, is work on the hips. So that if the hips are more mobile, they can take the burden so the lower back doesn't need to be involved in movements of daily life. But it takes time to build that strength, right? And that is what we're looking for. A strong spine, then look at the mobility of the hips. The hypermobility, people already have it banked. They've already got hip mobility. So it's just a case of maintaining good strength. A lot of the guys, a little bit more stiff, we need to spend more time working on hip mobility. Myself would fall into that category as well. Right? We do need to spend a bit more time working on the mobility of our hips once we've got good strength in the spine. But the strength comes first. Very important. So it's a positive view, but Sherry, it's a bit harder to build that stability in the first instance, right? You're often not very good at it. It's going to take a little bit more time. You have a few more bumps in the road early on, but then as you progress, you're going to do well. You're going to do well. It's just getting through that early part. And this is the thing, right? Everybody's got a different challenge. You don't need different exercises because you've got hypermobility and a degenerative disc. You need to go through the process, but you will have a different experience going through the process in terms of what's hard and what's easy, what you struggle with and what you find, you can fly through. And that's different for everybody, even people with the same condition. Corbin has said, how do you target someone with a very narrow spinal canal in the thoracic region post-laminectomy? I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure specifically what we would do in that scenario, Corbin. Most of the stuff we're talking about is going to be around the lower back specifically. Blondie said, my sciatica is feeling better with your advice. Thank you. Well, thank you for sharing. Thank you, Blondie. very much appreciated. ALP has said, any advice on how to get through flights from Thailand with lower back pain? Do your best. If you've got a good warning, a good time ahead of you before you've got those flights, then I would definitely try and make some real progress on the rehab front beforehand. But ALP and anyone else that's live now, especially on TikTok, send us a DM and say, hey, Mike, can you send me a link to the Traveling with Back Pain podcast? And I'll just watch that because it's like 30 minutes, 20 minutes full of a bunch of helpful tips in there. Stoic has said, I can't stand for long because of a recent knee surgery and my back is flaring up because I have to lay down. Yeah, that's going to be tough, Stoic. Like, it's not good. When we have one injury that bounces into the next, the back will be compensating for the knee, but the back's bad, and we're just going to have to do the best we can at this stage. And then rehab, as we can. We have to prioritize the area that's the weakest and do your best not to abuse the lower back as much as possible if that's the knee. And then obviously as the knee starts to come along, we're going to have to roll over to the back. It's going to be strategy. You're going to have to do the best you can, and that's all we can say, really. It's going to vary at different times through that recovery process, which area you're focusing on. What else have we got coming in through here? We've got McDonnie has asked for any advice on C4, C5. Send us a DM just asking about the Whiplash podcast. That'll be the best thing for that, just to keep it focused on the lower back. Patrick, how can you progressively overload exercises like dead bugs and marching bridges? As you're going through the program, there are harder variations of those, but guys, sometimes people think, we used to get a question before about, hey Mike, why do you talk about the squats and the hip hinges so much? We're not doing core exercises anymore. What about these dead bugs, marching bridges, other ab exercises? And you guys need to understand that the floor-based ab stuff, the stuff you traditionally think of as an ab exercise, they become very much relegated to the realm of a primer exercise. That's not to say they're not valuable, but once you're at the point where you're squatting 30, 40, 50, 60 kilos, right, and more, or even before that, the strain that's on the midsection to stabilize a load that might be coming through your shoulders in some way, shape, or form is significantly greater than that which you're going to be able to expose yourself to on a dead bug. And how often are you really having to do that? The dead bug is not as transferable to daily life as the other exercises. And so you're going to build a much stronger back by focusing on building through the squat and the hip hinge. A much stronger core by focusing on building through the squat and the hip hinge. A much stronger core by focusing on the additional challenges that come from things like a step up, things like the single leg hip hinge, which adds that extra primer of left to right instability into the mix. Those are going to be much better. That being said, we talk about this in the program, the dead bugs and the marching bridges, they start to become, as we get to phase 4 and as we start to build up, a valuable primer to warm ourselves up, engage a bit of that trunk stiffness, so we're ready to go and work out well on our chosen exercise, the squat or the hip hinge, as the case may be. Jackie has said, excuse my ignorance, but how can I DM you as I'm also flying too? Jackie, you can't, I'm afraid, and that's nothing to do with you. That's just because the TikTok guys can. So just bear with me one moment, guys. What I'm going to do, for those of you that are on TikTok, how to travel safely. Pretty sure that's the one. Yeah. I'm just going to paste this in the chat for you. So Jackie, you can take this link. And you go and watch that video. That's the video that I would send in TikTok, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work over there. So yeah, you guys can't do that on YouTube. But guys, if you're watching this after the fact on YouTube specifically, then post in the comments, right? Because then we get those comments and we can direct you to the right place. I think we're going to be wrapping it up here, guys. I'm just going to have a quick scan through. If there's any last questions, please do post them in. I've got one here. Tom Randall has said, L34 Spondy, I'm not sure what grade. Will this change my rehab? It only changes your rehab in the fact that you need to observe it more strictly than the average person. Because if we've got that spondylolisthesis, maybe there's a pars defect, maybe it's grade 1, grade 2, I don't know. But you've got a little bit more loss of integrity because the segment itself has this failure at the level of the bone, if it's a lytic spondylolisthesis. And so you just need to observe everything we're talking about with more stringence. And specifically that comment I made a little bit earlier on about building strength through the spine and then observing good hip mobility. Why are we working on hip mobility? Because what we want is that the body can move in all sorts of manners, right? But with the hips, and I just have to correct TikTok. Oh, no, I don't. No, it's all good. Okay. When we're doing things the spine, the further away from the midline the spine gets, left and right twisting, the more it preferentially strains certain parts of the tissues. Whereas with the hip joint, for example, it's going to be strong in all ranges. The joint is congruent in all ranges. And so there's not that same degree of vulnerability that kicks in compared to the spine. So what we're doing by building good strength and stability is meaning, and good hip mobility, is meaning that if I want to tie my shoelaces and I come down here, I've got good hip mobility so that I only have a little bit of a bend in the spine, as opposed to the habit of tie my shoelaces up. There's a lot more strain on the spine when I go through that range of motion than if I use more of my hips and knees and ankles to get down there. So for the case of the Spondy, it just means that if you've got good habits and good hip mobility and a strong spine, the strong spine coming first, you're going to deal with the fact that that L3-4 is a vulnerable point, and you'll be more regularly not exposing it to variable or vulnerable positions while you're building strength and stability for the long term. So sure, it'll still be able to bend there, but the further it bends, the more it exposes that segment to strain. And there's a little bit of a weakness at that segment compared to other segments of the spine that we need to account for. So building a strong spine and mobile hips that are greater in their mobility than the average is going to be the way forward. For the long term I'm talking about, not like 5 minutes. It's got to be long term. James said, just watch the video from the start about hip thrusts. What if I have a Smith machine and I can set it up more safely? Are they good to do then? Getting out of the... Yes would be the honest answer there, James. Yes would be the honest answer. But I would make sure that I was focusing on my squat and hip hinge much more. Much more. Because you're going to build... You're building a movement that is much more useful for you in a coordination, skill, balance, and everything basis. And so I think the value of the hip thrusters is in the individual that maybe has been on a bodybuilding show and got told their glutes weren't quite big enough. Like, I don't do hip thrusters, but my glutes are reasonably sized from just doing squats and hip hinges and deadlifts and those kind of things over the years. Like, you don't really need to do them. I know there is a lot of focus on them, perhaps, but I think you're much better off focusing more on the squat and the hip hinge, the load-bearing exercises, rather than just trying to build like these incredibly strong glutes. Most of the time, I feel like, you know, you see guys in the gym doing the hip thrusters, and it's more a case of, I'm just going to shift a ton of weight. Same thing as leg press, right? So I'm less keen on them, to be honest, really. And the utility of them, if we've got a lower back injury, I think is much less so. Because again, we're trying to actually build strength of not just the lower body, but also the spine itself. And so we want to make sure that when we're doing these exercises, we're engaging everything from here all the way through, whereas the tendency is, well, that's just going to really allow you to hammer the legs really hard. And a lot of people, when they get further on in their training, in their rehabilitation, won't necessarily have a problem with building stronger legs. And what happens is they build the level of the strength of the legs starts to come up here, and the strength of the back stays down here. So if we're doing squats and hip hinges, then we're building both at the same time, right? Whereas if we are doing something like a glute bridge as our primary non-load bearing exercise, then we're building up here through the legs, and the back's not really getting the same level of stimulation. James has said, I worked the Bulgarian split squats up to 55 kilos for 10 reps of 4 sets. Nice work. That's good. I'd have a look at what your squats are. I always prefer building your load on the squats rather than anything else. Squats and hip hinges, sorry, rather than the single leg exercises. Can I use a glute band above? Nirav, I wouldn't worry about that just yet, but you can use a glute band if you want. It's just a question of why. What are we using it for? Sam Yak has said, please can you reply to my comment above? I haven't got answers from the neurologist or orthologist in my area. It's been a huge problem in my life. I don't have that comment in here, I'm afraid. Samyak. Nirav said, my ankles when doing the RDL, I did squat and squats just above the knee. You can do. I think we're getting overly complex though, Nirav, at this stage in the process. I wouldn't really worry about that too much, to be completely honest. I mean, sure, like a really helpful tip that I got when I went to the strength seminar with Sean McInroy, or a reminder, was when you're doing your squats, you plant your feet where you want them, and the same for the hinges, and you just screw them in like that. You just screw, my feet didn't move then, but I'm just opening out my stance, engaging the glutes, and that gets a real nice thing. That's sometimes why people get told to use the band lower down or around the knees. But just doing that with my feet rooted into the ground and then going through the squat or the hip hinge is enough. I think, messing around with the glute band early on, it might not necessarily be ideal. Like, I'd focus on the simplicity of the exercise first, and ask the question of strategically, what's the rationale for trying to use the glute band specifically. James has said, worried about the squats as back squats hurt my back months after fear. You've got to do the right amount, right? You've got 55 kilos. I don't know how you're holding the 55 kilos on the split squats. It might be in two hands or something like that. You should always be doing the squat with correct form and aggravation-free. So if we've hurt our back doing squats, that's not good, right? But that is, why did we hurt our back? Did we do too much weight? Did we lose form? Etc. etc. We have to make sure that we're operating with good form and we're sticking at reps of 10. I think pushing the limit for you guys if you've got a back injury is not wise. But I think the notion of not being able to do a squat, I don't think that's necessarily the best option. I do think you do want to have some kind of baseline. You might say, do you know what? I'm going to get my squat up to my body weight and then I'm kind of going to leave it there. I don't really care about doing any more than that. Fair enough. And I want to carry on with the 10 reps of the split squats. You might make that personal choice. That's perfectly fine. But, don't be averse to building a good squat, because you want to have that in. It's just the practice of that movement that you're doing every day. Remember, it's not just about the exercise for the exercise's sake. It's about the exercise for the way in which it allows us to just do these things subconsciously every single day without thinking. That's the additional benefit. So hopefully that helps, guys. Guys, we're going to wrap it up there. Hopefully it's been helpful for you. If you do have any other questions, you can always post them in the chat afterwards, guys, if you're watching this after the fact. Those of you on TikTok, thank you for all the questions. Those of you on YouTube, thank you again for all of the questions. Really appreciate all of those that have come in. We will be back live tomorrow, I think around about lunchtime, 12 o'clock UK time. So please, you post your questions in there. Then we'll have the event up probably early tomorrow morning. For those of you that need any more help with your back injuries or anything like that, you can always check out the link. I'll paste it in the pinned comment on YouTube. I've already pasted it in the chat there as well. And those of you guys on TikTok, if you need any more help, you can check out the link in the profile page. Watch the video there. It'll explain more. Thank you to all of you guys that joined. I hope it's been helpful. And Jackie, I think you said you were flying. So hope you have a safe trip the rest of the way. And guys, see you next time. Thanks for joining.